Pokemon Legends Arceus is without a doubt the most interesting Pokemon game ever made from the mainline series, and as the 20th entry, Game Freak tried to shake up the gameplay formula in more ways than one to create a new game that didn't just feel like an expansion on what came before it. And now we have a game that released to pretty high praise from most of the Pokemon community, so much to where I've seen a higher percentage of people say this is the best mainline Pokemon game of all time. Yes, even above the games that actually had more content. Now sure, a lot of this is new toy syndrome, but that's why we're here today, to break apart the game and give proper criticism where it belongs. But of course, that isn't the only goal. Since this is a new game, and people enjoy hearing about other players' experiences as well, I'll also be chiming in with thoughts from actually playing the game. But with all of that said, timestamps are on screen, and now let's discuss this very innovative entry for the Pokemon series. The first thing needing to be discussed 100% has to be the gameplay, which got a major overhaul on all grounds. So let's talk about the shakeups to the in-battle play first. So as a whole, the turn-based battle system got changed in an effort to be nothing like the previous iterations. So here's a good question. What isn't changed? First, let's talk about the Pokemon. With cut content first, abilities are gone, held items are gone, and the EV system was reworked again. But thankfully this time, it's a simpler version of what we had in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, with each stat only capping at 10 boosts, and with the only way to boost them being specific items. In terms of battle mechanics that have been changed, the turn-based combat has essentially been thrown out. In previous games, both players decided their actions at the same time, and the game was essentially a mind game. Now this new system is absolutely abhorrent, as the turn order is abysmal and is not set by default. While it's influenced by the speed stat, it isn't directly tied to it. So our new abomination for speed is action order, and it's influenced by either style attacks, more on that soon, or attacks from the previous games that either dropped speed or had priority. The issue here is it leads to major speed inconsistencies where you could end up not being able to attack while your opponent can attack anywhere up to 4 times, while you have 0 counterplay to the bad time you'll have to deal with where you get hit without being able to play the damn game. See, the issue is when it's your turn, your opponent can do absolutely nothing. There is 0 counterplay to be had on a turn. And sometimes you can even just switch to a Pokemon for free. Sometimes you don't. Like, this is an absolute mess of a system that just does not work and kills the joy that the battle system had. And I haven't even gotten to the battle gimmick yet. So what is this gimmick? Well, it's this new attack-oriented thing called styles. These will modify your attacks in one of 2 ways. Using 2 PP, with these attacks you can either A, increase your power and secondary effect chances from an attack, with the drawback of making your follow-up attacks less likely to happen. Or B, a drop in your power and a lower % chance of your secondary effects, so you're more likely to be able to attack again immediately. But of course, since PP is never really an issue, the drawback barely exists. On paper, this sounds like they wanted to make the Urshifu gimmick, but also again. However, it seemed like they had no clue how to implement this, as they just straight up ruined the battle system. Now you're probably thinking, Mister, you're overreacting. These few changes don't ruin the game, but the issue is I'm still not even done talking about new systems. Weather has been reworked as a whole, but this time it can only be in use if the overworld has any of the weather effects in use. This means there is no way for you to change the weather at all. Building further on, some of the weather effects have actually been adjusted, but it'd be pointless to add them here. So the things of note is the fog from Diamond and Pearl is back, and its accuracy drop is even worse this time around. In terms of status conditions, sleep and freeze were replaced with less potent statuses, as well as every status condition now all being temporary, and they will all end after battle. Freeze was replaced with frostbite. This is just burn, but instead of cutting physical attack, it will cut special attack. Even for those who don't play competitively, this change is excellent, as not only does it complete a triangle of dropping statuses, it's also not a blatantly unfair mechanic like freeze just making a whole Pokemon obsolete. Sleep was replaced with drowsy. Now this status will increase your damage taken, and also sometimes stop you from attacking like paralysis. Honestly, this one just doesn't work too well. It's a neat concept, but the purpose of sleep is to shut down an entire Pokemon, not to be paralysis, but worse. An interesting change I'd like to see return in later titles is the new version of running away. It's not really too different, but when you click the run, it's actually guaranteed instead of using in-battle speed and abilities and determining from that if you should build a run or not. You can also move your trainer around in battle. This doesn't really do anything but allow enough for you to run from battle by getting far away enough from a battle, or for just changing the camera angle, which you will never do because of the opponent's HP bars. A very, very obnoxious mechanic change is the EXP system. While functioning similar to how it did in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, there's one huge change that hurts the game far more than it needs to, and that's the fact you don't get your EXP immediately from each Pokemon you knock out, but rather you'll get all of your EXP from the battle all at once when the battle finally ends, which will completely steal EXP from your Pokemon that otherwise would have earned it should they have KO'd a Pokemon and then faint later in the battle, this being really only noticeable in trainer battles. But remember what I just said about the abilities being gone? Well, that's technically not 100% true. Regigigas, why'd they do this to you? Double battles from every single game since Ruby and Sapphire have also been cut, and surprisingly, the Horde battles from Generation 6 return, kind of, but this time they've been reworked to not be the same at all. So, throughout the game, either in specific trainer battles or in wild Pokemon battles, should enough wild Pokemon be near you when you start battle, you will be battling however many Pokemon were there trying to fight you, which means you can fight anywhere up to 1 to 4 Pokemon at a time. Again, while this concept previously worked well, the issue here is again the game's battle system. Since you are potentially battling 2 to 4 Pokemon at once, the core battling system reaches a rough spot to where you'll be able to attack what is basically the old gameplay system, because you can rarely ever use agile style attacks to attack twice. If you do so, you're just delaying the target's attack to be the last of the group you have to fight, but which most of the time is still before your next attack. Hell, if you can even double at any point, consider yourself lucky. Oh, strong style? That's just a death sentence waiting to happen, allowing up to 4 Pokemon to target your only one twice each. So the only real way to do these battles at all is to never touch strong style until it's a 1v1. Thankfully, you are able to actually change the Pokemon you are targeting in battle. And finally is the change to evasion and accuracy drops. Accuracy drops essentially don't exist anymore, and the attacks that would cause it lead into our evasion replacement. Evasion has been reworked into a new state of being. This is obscure. While working similarly, it's a temporary state that is essentially still evasion, but you cannot stack it, and it'll also wear off after a while, which is significantly more fair. Although I'm likely forgetting something, these are the big talking points of the new battle system. The thing is, as their first attempt at such a system, its flaws show very much, but it does have the potential to be fun, but more times than not, it'll be headache inducing and downright unfair. But with that said, we have finally finished speaking about the battle mechanics, which means we can finally talk about the out-of-battle gameplay. Without a shadow of a doubt, Legends Arceus is the Pokemon game to give you the most freedom when out of a battle, but there is still some battling related stuff you can do. So let's cover the trainer's battling ability now. So wandering around the world, the wild Pokemon of the region can get aggravated towards your presence, and thus they will try to fight your trainer on the overworld by throwing out attacks and trying to knock you out. Sadly, they didn't put a visible health bar on the screen, but they did add screen effects to show your damage by applying more textures to the screen. And of course, if you run out of health in the overworld, you'll be forced back to a camp and you will lose some items from your bag. So with that being said, what can you, the trainer, do? Well, you have several options in terms of the actions you can perform while exploring. First up is running, making its triumphant return. By pressing on the movement stick, you will walk faster. Yeah, it's barely noticeable and really is not helpful. Sneaking is also an option to make your existence less known, to allow you to get closer and sneak up on the Pokemon. You also have a roll. This is completely overtuned, as you are completely invulnerable while using it, with very generous startup and end times. Yeah, this roll is essentially as nutty as it was in the Dark Souls games. But the big stuff your trainer can do now is throw items and Pokeballs. This will allow you to either distract Pokemon by feeding them berries in the overworld so you can catch Pokemon easier, especially considering this game has 3 new types of Pokeballs, which get thrown at different angles with 3 quality levels each. One that will throw it with a normal curve, one that's heavier and does not go as far but more effective if you sneak up on the Pokemon from behind, and another set of balls that will fly in a straight line, which makes the regular line of Pokeballs less effective once the Feather Ball is obtained. And may I remind you, this can all be done without engaging any Pokemon in battle. Ride Pokemon make their return from Sun and Moon. But how does this work? Well, similar to those games, they are unlocked as you progress through the game, with a single Ride Pokemon being unlocked via each area. And I will say, Weirdier and Basculegion are excellent and have 0 issues. Weirdier Predator can for some reason allow you to access locations that you probably should not be able to reach. Sneasler has an issue of being slow, but otherwise fine. Ursaluna is basically useless outside of looking for specific items or a single story event. And then there's Braviary. Man, the sad part is, it's basically fine, but there's one big issue, and that's the fact there's no way to fly upwards after your startup. So that means without landing, there is no way to get more height, which feels pitiful for a large bird. Again, this sucks because trying to get extra height when going up a hill or a mountain, you'll have to get on and off Braviary all the time or just switch to Sneasler. Be careful when departing from Braviary or exploring cliffs, as fall damage can and will kill your trainer, sending them back to a camp in the area. Speaking of camps in the area, this game, like all, has fast track, which in this game is accessible via the minus button when you're out in the wild, and then you can select a camp or noble Pokemon arena to instantly fly to. But of course, there is an issue, and it's the fact you cannot do this if a wild Pokemon is targeting you at all, which, may I note, is very likely most of the time, and sometimes when you get far away from them, they can still see you when they've even potentially despawned already. But I just mentioned the noble Pokemon, so it's time for our final battle-related talking point. So, the noble Pokemon are this game's boss Pokemon, sort of replacing gym battles from the core games. So, how is it? Completely awful. So in these battles, your goal is to drop the opponent's HP gauge to 0, but to do so, you use your trainer and throw bags of bombs and other plot armor nonsense at the Pokemon. After a certain point, the Pokemon can stagger, and then you can send in one of yours to battle it. Beating it here staggers the Pokemon again for your trainer to spam more bombs at, but the battle itself will not drop its HP bar. See, the issue here is you will never do this, as not only is it just slower and less effective, but it's also pointless. So you'll just end up spending all the time in these battles pressing the same button with a lot of breaks during the battle rolling, because again, this grants you full invulnerability when in use, which is important because the noble Pokemon is of course trying to kill you. And of course, you have no way to heal your trainer in these battles. Overall, these battles are without a doubt the worst element of the game, as it's just boring and very scripted. If you've done the first battle, you've essentially done them all. And you want to know what the worst part is? Imagine the very final battle of the main story ending on one of these battles. Oh wait! This leads the game to a point to where the core gameplay is immensely flawed, and it makes it a chore to play. However, we have finished talking about the core gameplay, so now it's finally time to talk on the game's difficulty, progression, and the region. Starting with the region itself, we have Hisui, an ancient version of Sinnoh before its more modern colonization that we see in the future games like Diamond and Pearl. This new take on a region allows us to see and participate in a world where Pokemon and humans don't have a bond and are more like enemies than anything, something we'll touch on with the story. But this setting allows for quite a lot of gameplay quirks. In this case, open world gameplay, since this game's setting allows for more exploration of the region's landscape, since there's not just multiple towns in every single area you go to. Speaking of areas, let's talk about the region's layout. So, the region of Hisui is broken down into 7 areas, but technically 5, as the first one is Jubilife Village, being the game's main hub with your important facilities, and the second location being essentially useless outside of late game story stuff. However, the other 5 areas are all large and expansive pieces of landmass packed with wild Pokemon and locations to explore. Or so it seems at first. Don't let the game or other people fool you though, as it's just like the Sword and Shield wild area, but this time there's 5 of them. But of course, since this is an open world experience, the map gains quite a handful of issues during your main playthrough in these areas, since all you'll be doing is walking across the entire empty map with very little to distract you, just inflating the game's runtime. This being a big reason you might not like the game at all, if you're not hopelessly attracted to open world games. Thankfully, the game does offer some reason to explore, this being side quests, a hunt to collect all the unknown forms, and of course a collectathon for all the Spiritomb Wisps, but we'll touch on these later. Regardless, excluding the first area, the others are gated off until your battle against the previous area's noble Pokemon. But sadly, that's not the only progression gate in the way. Great, here comes the absolute most miserable, insufferable part of the video, the Pokedex progression gating. So, how do I explain this? Well, here's the deal. This game has a rank system. Its purpose was supposed to encourage you to do these arbitrary tasks to fill out the first ever Pokedex, but then you'd be rewarded with new Pokeball types, while also having an increased level cap in which your Pokemon will listen to you. The issue though that arises is the fact that you cannot progress to the next area until you do enough of these tasks for a rank up. Sure, you can track your progress by the Pokedex menu. This doesn't stop the fact that you'll be trying to enjoy the story, and the game just comes to a screeching halt for anywhere up to 15 minutes to an hour of your time. But of course, there will be people trying to defend this nonsense since your goal in the game is to complete the Pokedex. And to that I say, wow, just like every Pokemon game since Red and Blue! Regardless, the game's progression has you do this 5 times alongside the noble battles. And after the 5th area, your endgame will begin, and this task is thrown out the window to be an awful memory. And finally, the difficulty, which is rough as this game has an immense lack of trainers for you to battle, making your pacing for the level progression actually pretty annoying. And yes, I mean an immense lack of trainers. But should you be catching random Pokemon between the long stretches of the game where nothing is happening, you should be fine. But again, with the EXP mechanic changes I mentioned earlier, good luck keeping your team decently leveled even with the forced EXP share. However, if leveling is an issue for you and you'd rather catch some over-leveled Pokemon instead, well, good news, Buttercup, because unlike Sword and Shield, this game has zero restrictions on your ability to catch the massively over-leveled Pokemon roaming around any of the wild areas you may be in. But of course, since this is Generation 8, the Pokemon themselves will be an absolute pain to catch if your level is lower than theirs. But thankfully, we're done with the region and its gameplay, so now we get to go on to the features and endgame content. Ah yes, the features. Where to begin? Let's start with the gameplay related stuff. First up, let's talk about the mass outbreaks. Think of the swarms of old increasing the appearances of certain Pokemon, but this time all they did to change it was increase the odds of a shiny Pokemon appearing. Next is the space-time distortions. These large areas form randomly on the map, and once they form, you have a certain time to reach it, and after being there for an amount of time, the area will start spawning a lot of Pokemon wanting to attack you and a bunch of items, both of which are very rare spawns, allowing for Pokemon spawns, such as the starters, Porygon, or the fossils. As previously mentioned, there's the collectathon you can do for all the unknown forms in Spiritomb. The noble Pokemon can actually be rebattled if you need to fall asleep faster. You could always subject yourself to a new form of torture, being the 100% progression for all the research tasks that make getting the shiny charm in the Generation 6 games look easy. There's also a photo studio, but let's be honest, you're never touching this. Trainer customization also returns, and there's a new addition, being the ability to skip to a certain time frame. This exists when healing out in the wild and will make it nighttime or daytime on command, which is a great addition. Please let this one return. A big addition to the game that only exists because of the open world gameplay is crafting. Yep, you can craft items by adding 2, 3, or 4 items together, and then you will get another one. Obviously, this only exists to encourage exploring the open world, but there's a new issue. There's a feature that only exists because of the open world, and it was an issue that's been abolished since Generation 4. That, of course, is the limited bag space. Yep, that feature that would cost you items that you try to pick up, all because of an arbitrary limit being placed on you. Thankfully, this cap can be increased, but of course this only exists because it's an open world game. And yes, the item storage also exists again. Trainers can be rebattled after beating the main story, so that's neat, I suppose. The Pokemon storage got a rework again. Now, you can no longer access the PC anywhere, which is a bad decision, but obviously it makes sense logically. But thankfully, you can at least access it at the camps, so there's that. Mass release from the Let's Go games has also returned, but sadly it has to be unlocked, but good lord is it handy to have in this game. Another big change comes to your Pokemon's attacks. So whenever a Pokemon learns a new attack in this game, it is permanently learned, but unequipped. So how does one get this fixed? If you go to your menus and go to your Pokemon, there's a new menu, which actually allows you to equip these attacks whenever you feel like it. Now, there's not even a need for a move reminder, since you can just do it whenever you feel like it. And yes, this also applies for move tutor attacks. Breeding your Pokemon no longer exists. And finally, the communications features. Guys, it hurts me to say this, but battling with your friends or randoms online has been completely removed. Literally, one of the 2 most important features from the entire series was just thrown out and abandoned. With that disgrace aside, trading is still intact. There's also a small little addition for communication features, which I would say is pretty neat, but it did not need to exist. This is the satchel system. So whenever your trainer dies in the overworld, you will black out and reappear at a camp. The thing is, when this happens, you will drop a handful of items and you will not be able to get them back. This becomes a satchel. To actually get the items back, you'll be relying on another player to pick it up, as it'll appear in their game. And when they recover in the overworld where you died, you'll get your lost items back. And of course, you can do this to pick up other people's items. So, is there an incentive to this? Yes. By returning satchels, you'll get some merit points. These can be traded at a shop for some goodies and evolutionary items, which, since held items have been removed, they can just manually be used on the Pokemon if they previously needed to hold them to evolve, which is a spectacular idea. But as far as features are concerned, that's all there is to it. But we're not done talking about the non-story stuff just yet, as there's a few things I didn't find a section for to speak about. Okay, so there's a few notes I want to touch on before the story. The first one is the game's list of available Pokemon for use, because of course not every single Pokemon is usable on a Switch game. Legends Arceus clocks in with 242 Pokemon with the random inclusion of Alolan Vulpix. 242! See, people complained about this issue in Sword and Shield, but it's far worse here. Seriously, not only is this number less than what we have in Gold and Silver, it's also less than half of what was in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Listen, I don't care about this stuff. It only helps at making the Pokedex completion more possible, but of course I have to speak about this. This game also managed to fix an issue which is plagued players since Red and Blue. What is this, you may ask? Well, they found an actual solution for players who cannot trade to evolve their Trade Evolution Pokemon by adding an item that's existed in spin-off games ever since Generation 3, being the Link Cable. This amazing item functions like a stone and will evolve those trade required evolutions without actually trading those Pokemon. Please, for the love of everything, bring this item back. But of course, this solves another issue that's existed since Red and Blue, and that is the fact that since every single Pokemon in this game can actually be obtained, as of course you will never need to trade for any evolutions, and version exclusives just do not exist. The game's graphics are fine, I suppose. Art is in the eye of the beholder after all, but one last note I want to speak on is the soundtrack. The overall music has a pretty bad habit of being extremely forgettable. However, the battle music on the other hand is a hit and a miss, as the Generation 4 box art legendary Pokemon have great music remixes. Meanwhile, the wild Pokemon and trainers were not so lucky, as their music is again remixes, this time of the most boring battle themes from the other Sinnoh games. But with that aside, we can finally talk about the game's final point of note, being the story. Here is your spoiler warning for the story in Pokemon Legends Arceus, because some people actually care about this. So skip the timestamp on screen if your perfect game is about to be ruined. Anyways, let's begin. So the story starts very similar to the Mystery Dungeon games. You start in an emptiness as Arceus does the basic intro stuff, before turning your phone into a plot device and dumping you into the land of Hisui with no memories, of course being another Mystery Dungeon reference, as you just straight up fall out of the sky, with that last part being very important. From here, the professor finds you, and after a while, the Pokemon with him run off. So you go to help him, but on your way to help him, you find your phone left with a message instructing you to seek out all of the Pokemon, being your primary goal of the game, despite not being important until after the main story is done anyways. Afterwards, you go to help the professor by catching those Pokemon that ran off, and after doing so, he's grateful and gives you a place to stay for the night in Jubilife Village. And after talking with the Galaxy team, in which the professor works alongside, you end up being tested to join them as your Pokemon catching skills are unmatched by the people of Hisui, which in turn will give you a place to live, so, and I quote, you don't die by the hands of the wild Pokemon, which of course feeds into this game's setting and atmosphere very well. But of course you get assisted by a pointless character that's supposed to be your rival, as they help you pass the test to join Galaxy Team, as of course you pass and join them. Now you'll finally get to play the game after 40 minutes. From this point, working on the first ever Pokedex is important, but not the main focus of the plot. As from this point, the Galaxy Team leader will task you with battling the noble Pokemon in an attempt to neutralize them from being a threat. This is how you spend 80% of the main story. As from this point, the game puts a minor focus on the lore and the people of the region. The focus they want you to care about is the Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan, which are essentially religious groups worshipping the almighty Sinnoh. One believing it to be a deity of time and the other of space, of course being a Dialga or Palkia reference. The issue here is the game doesn't do anything special to make you actually care about these tribes or their leaders, but expects you to care about them, which of course falls flat. Speaking of plot pieces that fall flat, once you reach the 4th area, you get introduced to a character for the first time, being Ingo. Does he seem familiar? Good, because he originally appeared in Black and White as well as their sequels with zero plot relevance. Obviously they wanted him in the game to be a direct reference to something rather than a minor one, and with that decision, a pretty small plot hole arises, because the game states specifically that similar to you, he also came from another world and also has amnesia. The issue is, unlike you, he has zero plot relevance, so the fact they even went out of their way to drag him in the game amounted to nothing other than a small, hey, I know that guy kind of reference. It's just dumb, pointless, and a waste of time, only begging for more questions that never get answered. Regardless, now we get to talk about the endgame. So after clearing out the 5th noble Pokemon, you will wake up the next day, and the sky is just absolutely bone postponed as the rift in the sky is starting to become problematic, changing the skybox. Yeah, I never mentioned the rift until now because it just didn't do anything, despite it staring you down for the entire game. So as a result, you trek to the Galaxy building. As plans are being brainstormed to deal with the rift, a safety precaution is made to secure the safety of Jubilife Village, and that is for you to be exiled while they figure something out, because of course you fell from the sky, so you have to be linked to it, right? So after you wander around for a while, Volo, this merchant dude, gets in contact with you in order to discuss a plan to seal the rift. So the two of you head to this random house in the middle of nowhere to talk to a lady whose only purpose in life is to help you seal the rift. So you get tasked with going to the 3 lakes with the assistance of one of the clan leaders of your choice. Not that they matter too much. And after completing the 3 trials of the lake legendaries, you can craft the red chain. And after dealing with a minor inconvenience, you reach the Temple of Sinnoh, and the rift is causing issues. And then Dialga or Palkia is summoned right before you based on which irrelevant character tagged along earlier. Then you catch the legendary, and then the other one appears. So you end up leaving in fright. And this is where I have another issue, because you just leave him there. The game just wants to build its stakes up, but they don't. Seriously, to fix this issue, all they had to do is recode the distorted skybox, but they didn't, and it makes you feel like nothing is happening at the game's climax, where it should obviously be the opposite. Regardless, now you get a red Pokeball and return to the temple for your final battle, with the other legendary, which changes to its new form, and it's a pointless, boring, noble battle. Oh yeah, gamers, throw those bags at the beings of time or space. But regardless, you catch the Pokemon in a cutscene, and that's the end of the game's main story. A very uneventful mess of good ideas that were not executed well. Wow, very similar to the last Pokemon story Game Freak wrote. But we're not done yet, as the post-game continues on a bit left out from the main story, so let's touch on that. A new day begins, and Volo wishes to see you as he has a grand plan to help him find all the plates in an attempt to meet Arceus. So after you end up going on a fetch quest to gather 17 of the plates, and Volo will suggest you to go look at some statues. Upon seeing a broken statue, he concludes it's the legendary Pokemon Giratina, and then he suggests you come with him and take the plates up to the Temple of Sinnoh in an attempt to find it. And this is an obvious trap. And surprise, he's also an absolute psychopath hellbent on meeting Arceus, and to do so, he needs to gather all 18 plates into one spot. So what's up now? He battles you in the only difficult battle in the entire game, with a team mostly being a reference. But of course, once you're done, Volo decides to pull out his trump card. Yes, Giratina just shows up, and now you have to fight that. So when you finally PP stall it, it'll begin to faint from struggle because your team is ruined and you're just sitting here spamming healing items. But guess what? It's not even over yet, because now the Giratina is changing form, so it's even stronger now. Okay, how does that work despite contradicting the lore? That's a discussion for another day. But congrats, you shut down his team of what is essentially 8 Pokemon without being healed between any of the fights, so now Volo screws off and is never seen again. And now you have the Azure Flute, and from here, you complete the Pokedex and can face off with Arceus. Overall, though I can say the postgame does help carry some of the slack from the main story despite being a fetch quest, I said some, not all. But that's all there is to Pokemon Legends Arceus. So, as this video's gone on for too long, let's tie that knot and finish it up. Ambitious with no direction is how I describe Pokemon Legends Arceus. A game with the intention to be the next big thing, when only really being an extension of what came before. With core battle changes that should never try to be re-implemented, that ruin the battling experience, while the everything else that you'd find in the game is either nice or just needs to be refined, goes to show if this for some reason becomes an actual series, that the potential's there. And sure, I know I've been negative for the most part with this video, but that's just because as a person who actually played the game, my experience was miserable and plagued by the new battle system and the progression gating. Odds are, I likely would have just stopped playing the game if this video wasn't the only reason I bought the game in the first place. But this is coming from somebody who isn't easily distracted by an open world. My final score, once again, will disagree with the masses, while also putting objective facts on the forefront. But I have to say, Pokemon Legends Arceus is a 4.3 out of 10. Similar to Sword and Shield, this is a game of unrealized potential and failing to deliver on good ideas. But hold up, we're not done yet. Going forwards, I'm also going to be dropping a suggestion on whether or not you should play the game. And my answer for this game is a yes and a no. Yes, for those who either love open world gameplay or are looking for a Pokemon game that is just different, or if you're heavily invested in games with a lot to do for 100% completion. However, if you do not like open world gameplay like myself, or progression gating, gaming, or even playing Pokemon competitively, you are in the wrong spot and should not buy this game. I thank you for your time.